Hello everybody. Today's subject is, can you love? Can you be in a healthy relationships when you are deeply traumatized? This is a request from a lady who helps me to make those little videos and thoughts. First of all, let me thank Isa for the beautiful scarf. Thank you, Isa. Lovely scarf. And also let me just dedicate this particular video to the memory of my beloved sister Christina, who passed away just before Christmas last year. So at the beginning, let me just quote a few people so we can wander through this subject and see what will happen. Buddha once said, "You yourself, as much as everybody in the entire universe, deserves your own love and affection." And Khalil Gibran, I quote, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls, the most massive characters, which are always based on the suffering." At the beginning of this talk, let me just quote a very prominent specialist, Basil van der Kolk, together with Peter Levine, on trauma and healing trauma. He has written a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I quote, "Trauma victims cannot recover until they become familiar with and befriend the sensation in their body. Being frightened means that you live in a body that is always on the guard. Angry people live with angry bodies. The bodies of a child abuse victims are tense and defensive until they find a way to relax and to be safe." So you see, it's very important to comprehend that if you are deeply traumatized and if you are not in any recovery whatsoever, your relationship will be really compromised because of it. And what would happen, what the outcome of trauma are, that sometimes you perpetually find people with whom you repeat the trauma. Is what we call a trauma bonding. So you attract, for instance, unavailable people to yourself, or maybe people who inflict the pain and sorrow, which is much too greater for you to continue with relationship. You may go into a power struggle. You may go into complete submissiveness. You may go into a silent passive aggressive. The relationship with traumatized people are at best compromised and at the worst practically impossible. So the consequences of trauma is that you will or might not at all relate even to yourself. You will not have any capacity to recognize who you are, to have time for hobbies, to have time for cherishing and loving yourself. Therefore, imagine, how could you possibly be in a loving relationship when you are not in a position to love yourself? Krishnamurti once said, "It is no use of sitting in a corner and meditate," and then this in modern days everybody meditates on all sorts of subjects. And meditating about oneself and life is very useful, but I cannot exist by myself, as Krishnamurti put it. I exist only in relationship to people, things, and ideas. So you see, the traumatized person might be very willing to meditate, and there are all sorts of, at the moment, occult groups which attract traumatized people because they offer them an instant solution or passive solution. Whereas, you see, we cannot really be in any shape or form able to relate properly unless we relate to ourselves. Traumatized persons would be by far much more triggered. What is trigger in a relationship? Triggers in the relationship is a massive surge from unconsciousness. It's something which was hidden, pushes forward to be present in the relationship. So if we don't know how to cope with the triggers, which usually therapy helps, we will be overwhelmed, drowned by all sorts of stories and energies and memories, and will not be in a position to relate well. We pollute the story. The space between two people will be polluted by triggers. We also will project a lot. We'll project good stuff, bad stuff about ourselves. So it's not really that easy. This suggestion, can we relate? Can we laugh? And what is laugh actually? Was very good suggestion. So we'll continue with that. As Krishnamurti put it, when I understand what love is, then I have relationship with another in which is no friction. Krishnamurti was a brilliant, brilliant thinker, because he used to laugh when he said, what do you call love? Is your projection, is your lust, is your triggers, is your madness love? You don't know how to love. Why are you talking about love? Do you understand what love is? This beautiful, soulful man, who was probably one of the first kind of Indian guru given to us in the West, which was very wise, very kind, and very centered. When you listen to him, you will know that this man is of full possession of himself and knows how to love. Another person who really does a lot for trauma and relationship is Peter Levine. He has written a book, Releasing the Tiger. Those two giants, Van der Kolk and Peter Levine, both Americans, brought our understanding of trauma and consequences for relationship in a huge, huge way. Peter Levine called trauma a hell on earth. And he was right about that. So imagine if two traumatized people are relating. What would they create? They will come to the relationship with this romantic concept that this is we're going to heal. But they will create most likely hell on earth. So the children which they will produce also will be between those two hellish individualities who will not be able to clear the deck. So this also what Levine said, the trauma resolved is a gift from heaven and gift from gods. So the trauma is hell and the trauma resolved is a gift from heaven. But we live in a culture when we are not paying attention to the emotional pain. We're not, we're betraying that. We're intolerant of the pain. We're intolerant of the fact that would probably make a mess of our life. And of course, when we are traumatized and when we are stressed, we produce enormous amount of stress hormones, which gives us strength to endure the pain and to endure trauma, to endure war, to endure other situation. But it is not good actually for our peaceful life, because we will be plagued also medically. Cortisol, adrenaline will take its toll on our health. So we need to go through a healing of trauma and also go to the spirit, through the instincts to the spirit. And as many people said before me, choosing love means that as the trauma releases cortisol and releases adrenaline, when we choose love, when we choose self-love, we release endorphins, which by the brain, which are very good thing to do, and endorphins have profound effect on our health and our happiness. So you can see that from every angle, whether it's genetical, archetypal, biochemical, emotional, spiritual, social, the trauma and the relationships are a very interesting subject. And you can see how healing from trauma would help us to relate to ourselves and to create healthier and better relationship. So we have to listen to our bodies. We have to listen to our instincts. We have to listen to our dreams. We have to listen to our emotions. And when you're traumatized and when you disassociated, which Orwell, the truth teller of the last century, would say, it's a double thing. We clinicians call that disassociation. We will not be able to listen to our body because we're out of body. So we will be in our head. But the concept in our head about relationship would usually be about love addiction. It would be about fantasy. It would be about avoiding reality at all costs. So we don't have the luxury to have a relationship. The luxury is really to withdraw a bit and pay attention to the inner life and to the trauma, so we can achieve an adequate tools to relate. The life understanding for every one of us comes from the self-knowledge and gaining the comprehension through instinctual and emotional. So if we don't have that, we won't have much a good tool. We will have lots of desires, but because unconsciousness is so chaotic, if we trigger that chaos into relationship, we'll create, as Levine put it, hell. Normally what happens, as trauma people would say, that very often people will prescribe whatever, lithium and Xanax and God knows what, and of course that doesn't work. The antipsychotic drugs prescribed to post-traumatic people would do more harm than good. One of the ladies, one of many people in recovery, so source of recoveries from drugs, alcohol, misuse of any kind to cope with the trauma. That's why the trauma-based addiction is always much more difficult to cope with. One of my doctors said, don't write poems about the suffering. Another doctor said, write poems about suffering. It's always about choosing by yourself what you want to do. Transformation as such is not possible if we are perpetually and utterly going to get abandoning the healing process. Healing means putting our defenses down. Relationship is putting our projection down, defenses down. It will help if we don't just project anything. Healing is, as somebody put it, is a different type of pain. It is the pain of recovering, remembering, and be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the capacity to love eventually. Recovery needs relationships. So you see, paradox, trauma means isolation very often, no relationship, repetition of useless, unavailable people to relate to, and recovery means relationship. We cannot recover alone. The way trauma affects relationship is that we miss a lot of parts of us which are blocked, unavailable to us. We don't relate to ourselves. We relate to destructive people. We avoid relationship altogether, and we cannot live alone. Avoidance is a kind of defense mechanism, and we cannot be kind. As we're not kind to ourselves, we're not kind to anybody else. So it's important for us to be kind. It's important for us to remember, as Alan Watts would put it, that we cannot be just sensitive to pleasure without being more sensitive to pain. We have ability to destroy and ability to heal. So we have to remember that we need to remember that healing will means a love, or at least therapist or friend, and receiving the witness. So when we go to relationship unhealed, we will create unhealed relationship. The same way as two lonely people do not make a healthy relationship. We must talk about our trauma. We must talk about past. We must heal it before we are able to relate. So let me just read something at the end, which is a lovely quote from Corinthians. Before that, I like you to just tell you that trauma brings shame, which also will demolish relationship. And the traumatized individuals hypervigilant, watchful, they are not really relaxed, so even sexually that would affect them. I will read you Corinthian at the end because that's a very, very nice quote. And before that, I read Maya Angelou, Sorry Not Sorry poem. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Life is going to give you just what you put in it. Put your whole heart in everything you do and pray that you can wait. And at the end, let me just read you what the letter of Corinthians chapter 13 is all about, very famous one. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it doesn't boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily opened. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoice with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Let's say Serenity Prayer. God grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Bye for now.